Okay, here we are back again. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are. This is Dr. Patrick Lockwood coming back to you live to have a little chat about the concept of love. And I think this will be, somewhat unintentionally a problematic or seemingly incendiary topic because I have a few disagreements that are all conceptual and I think might need to be explored more by people who really investigate the concept of love in a thoughtful way, because I think we've been caught up in a lot of dogma about the concept of love. And I think that's been a little problematic for the world. So, as many of you probably know, I've been talking about psychology concepts on YouTube for about 1.5 years, 2 years now. And I've been shifting more towards current events, but I want to shift back away to academic or conceptual discussion today, because I think this is one of those concepts that's readily given a pass by academics, and I don't know that it needs to be given a pass. I think it needs to be criticized and explored a little bit, because, a substantial number of people walk around all day talking about love. I love you, I love that, I love this, I love pizza, whatever it is. And they love a variety of people, places, and things, which to me has always been kind of curious, because I've always understood, kind of colloquially, love to mean more of a sense of romantic passion and commitment and intimacy. And I don't know how you can have romantic passion for pizza, etc. You know what I mean? So that's always been a bit confusing for me. But I'll get to some research later that might explain that away. Hundreds of songs have been written about love, thousands of stories and novels. And, one of the reviews that I was reading for this talk said that people have been talking about love for at least 5,000 years. And, it's one of those tales as old as time kind of concepts. And I think it's time to start rewriting the tale, because I don't think that we're operating with clarity when we talk about love, personally, professionally, academically, whatever. And I also tend towards the more pessimistic side of things. I'm also, I don't know, a little spectrumy. I don't know. I'm not particularly empathically attuned to the feelings of love and care and concern. So I don't know if this is about me or this is more about the literature. So I'll admit that there's possibly a bias there, and it's possibly on my end. I also tend towards kind of the pessimist view of love, as the great philosopher Rick Sanchez, I think who it was, from Rick and Morty, said, "What people call love is just a chemical reaction that compels animals to breed," which is, I think, half true and missing a few things, which I'll address here later. So before I ramble on about why I think love either needs to be abandoned as a concept or word or not, let me get some definitions out there, because I think it's important that we see the scope of the problem, and this is part of my argument, honestly. So one of the first problems I find is that there are so many conflicting and disparate definitions of what we call love. Again, one of the reviews that I read listed a number of them, and then there are others that I found too. So, the different kinds of love. Some are like filial love, or passionate love, or romantic love, or desperate love, or puppy love, or deficiency love, or limerence, or the 4 Greek types of love: agape, philia, storge, eros. And I mean, the list could just go on and on and on. There's different kinds of love, which I think is inherently problematic, because I think we're addressing a variety of different constructs. If we were to do factor analysis with all these different constructs, I think we're getting at core underlying things, which is where Sternberg's theory comes in later, but I'll talk about that in a minute. But let's go to the common conceptions of love. So Merriam-Webster dictionary says that love is a strong affection for another arising out of kinship or personal ties. The second definition is attraction based on sexual desire, affection and tenderness felt by lovers. Again, those are awfully broad, nebulous, not too behaviorally or psychologically narrowly defined definitions. Then let's go to Urban Dictionary, because I think that spices things up. Just because. So, in the Urban Dictionary definition, it's this long, rambling statement. It says that love is a feeling that goes beyond almost all sense of physicality. To love is to feel such a strong feeling for another that you can understand them in a way that very few can. Keep that in mind. Their very existence is a gift and a treasure. Rather, they are with you or not. I think they meant whether. Whenever filled with sadness or sorrow, the thought of this person will make you smile and remind you of why you are who you are. Even a mere glance at them, a simple smile, says so much, and you will find something new each and every time you get the glimpse. Everything about them is a treasure and inspires you to be the very best that you can be, to reach for your dreams, and your love drives you to believe in them and yourself because this person showed you that they are real. And it continues to ramble on for a couple more paragraphs. Totally emotionally driven, not thoughtful or coherent. And then Hatfield, Binsman, and Rapson is one of the reviews that I read. They define passionate love as a state of intense longing for union with another. I want you to key into the word union and the word longing. Okay. And then finally, we have Sternberg's theory of love. And his theory of love, his definition and theory of love, is both very practical and still a little hard to pin down, though. And it's split into three parts. So Sternberg says there are different types of love that are underwritten by three core constructs: intimacy, passion, and commitment. So some of the research using Sternberg's theory of love shows that, concepts like closeness, connectedness, and bondedness tend to, underlie loving relationships, and, passion, as Sternberg talks about it, is kind of the drive that leads to romance. It's kind of a motivational state. Physical attraction and sexual consummation. And then, commitment is kind of a short-term belief structure about your allegiance to someone, your feelings for and desire for someone. And in the long term is about, do you see yourself with the person? So intimacy is about connectedness and closeness. Passion is about the motivation to be with and engage with. And then commitment is just your attitude and belief structure towards, maintaining a relationship. That's Sternberg's theory. And according to Sternberg, those three constructs underlie things like non-love, which is a lack of all three things; liking, which is kind of a higher sense of maybe a little bit of passion, a little bit of commitment, but very low intimacy; infatuation, which is very high passion and very high intimacy; empty love, which is just like all lust and intimacy, or all lust and passion, no intimacy and commitment; and then romantic love, which is pretty high in all three; companionate love, which is low on passion but higher in intimacy and commitment; fatuous love, which is again basically lust; and then consummate love. So there's those different kinds of love. So you find, and there's a cool, I wish I could show you, there's a very cool triangular, if you can look it up online, there's a cool diagram of Sternberg's theory of love with the triangle in the middle, the liking, the infatuation, the empty love, which is just commitment, infatuation, which is just passion, basically, and liking, which is just intimacy. And it's really, really cool diagram. And, what he calls companionate love, which is intimacy plus commitment. One study showed that, companionate love, which is intimacy and commitment, actually hinders creativity because we're kind of, safe and not feeling very motivated. There's no passion. But anger promotes creativity. Interesting study. So if you really want to, be a creative person, your romantic partner, if you're all good with them, it's not going to be so good. Which is why all these musicians only do, or not only, but this is why you see a lot of musicians make a lot of records and do a lot of songs, etc., and shows really, really well when they're in the middle of a breakup or they just meet a brand new person. Fucking Taylor Swift, every time she breaks up with someone, is angry, and she writes 12 new songs about why the guy's a douchebag and never looks at herself, etc. That kind of stuff you see a lot. It's because the passion is what's driving them to be creative. Research basically shows that younger age is associated with higher passion. Obviously, when you're younger, you're more horny, etc. And as we get older, we score higher in measures of intimacy and commitment, basically speaking. That's a trend in the research for a long time. And other research shows that personality traits like agreeableness correlate with all three love dimensions of Sternberg's. And whereas concepts like conscientiousness from the Big Five are positively associated with intimacy and commitment, but less so passion, which makes sense. And Sternberg's theory has been validated across the LGBT community as well, with a number of studies. And a lot of IO-psych and economic and business research uses Sternberg's theory of love to conceptualize brand love, where you can actually kind of fall in love with a brand. I love Gucci, I love Rolex, whatever it is. And basically what the research shows from a few that I read is that brand love, where we have high intimacy, passion, and commitment, is a fairly, typical thing for the average person. And it's somewhat influenced by how much the product costs, how valuable it is, how normal it is to use the product. If it's like a facial cream, or if it's if it's like a hamburger, whatever it is. And then the tendency to anthropomorphize actually increases brand love, from what I saw in the research. So if you can make it a human-like thing, I love my car, because my BMW, because it keeps me safe and it gets me places, and it makes me feel powerful and passionate and da 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 da. And if you look at car commercials, for instance, you see a lot of quasi-emotional, quasi-empowering parts to how the cars are built. They're fast, they're sexy, they're powerful, they're ram tough, whatever it is. These are all kind of anthropomorphizing the cars, and it works according to the research, essentially. So there's that. So since one of the more comprehensive reviews explored all the different theories of love by Hatfield, Bensman, and Rapson, and it showed that, even though there are a number of disparate theories since 1944, I think it was when we started officially studying love in the social sciences, but basically Sternberg's is kind of the biggest, most comprehensive view of the concept of love. So that's the one I want to push on and challenge here, because I think maybe it needs to be broken apart, maybe it needs to be reconceptualized, or maybe it needs to be abandoned, which I know is saying a lot as someone who is not a big-time researcher and not a fancy whatever scholar. I'm finding myself struggling with his concept, even though it's very comprehensive and it seems to have a lot of ecological validity, etc. I think it's somewhat missing the boat based upon what we now know about animal studies, evolutionary psychology, anthropology, evolutionary biology, etc., which I'll talk about here in a second. So, and also there are like dozens of, pencil and paper scales to assess love, even one for Sternberg's theory. So here are my problems with all of these definitions, including Sternberg's, is that most of these definitions are focused on basically feeling states, I guess you could say, emotional, affective, motivational states that tend to wax and wane with time and a life experience, which is what the literature shows about passion, for instance. We all know the prototypical difference between what we call like the honeymoon phase and what we call like a committed relationship. Most of the time when you think of like a committed relationship, you don't think hot and sweaty, nasty sex and long walks on the beach and all these romantic love scenes. You think like hanging out at home, going to work, being good partners, taking care of each other. And when I say partner, I mean like literally like you two are in this together to make the business work kind of partner thing. Um, as opposed to when it's the honeymoon period, it's like, oh, we're lost in time and it feels good and it's never going to disappear, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that that honeymoon phase is indicative of that what Sternberg calls passionate love or high passionate love, which again the research shows dissipates over time. Um, I think it's a problem because I think we're talking about different constructs, and to use one word love to describe a variety of constructs I think doesn't serve us. And even Dr. Daniel Amen, one of the bigger neuro researchers, is admitting that love and infatuation are basically motivational states in his new book Brain and Love. So that's my first problem, is that we're really talking about emotional states that wax and wane. Most people when they're talking about love aren't talking about love. They're talking about lust or infatuation. Secondarily, the problem with a lot of these concepts, including Sternberg's, is, from what I can tell, all these concepts combine complex motivational states with complex emotional states or cognitive structures, etc. And I don't think it serves the average person with all these complex constructs to use an overly simplistic word that doesn't actually accurately capture them. Again, I think if we were to do factor analysis on all the different definitions and all the different concepts, you would find that there were core constructs, I propose, core constructs that actually underride what we call love. So let's address that now. So to solve the first problem, the fact that we're only talking about intimacy and passion, essentially, I essentially, if you want to keep using the word love, I would recommend removing any strong emotional component from it. And again, I might have a bias because of how I'm built, but I just don't think that intimacy and passion are what we would generally describe as love when we're talking about long-term committed behaviors. When you talk about pair bonding in animals, we're not talking as much about super intense physiological responses. If you watch, bonobos and chimpanzees and other mammals, long-term committed relationships are more about a sense of care and a sense of concern than they are about a sense of intimacy and a sense of passion. So that's the first thing. So my instinct really is to just split the concept of what we call love into Yakpongcep's two systems, the care system and the lust system. I honestly think this division and talking about our care, feelings of care, and our feelings of lust and our associated belief structures with those two concepts is more ecologically valid and face valid than using one word love to describe a variety of things. I think that's bad for us in science. That's my opinion. Because again, it seems like we all kind of intuitively separate our emotional and intellectual lives into either a more passionate, lustful, infatuated way of being, and or a more kind of caring, committed way of being. So let me see if I can explain a little bit. And I'm not going to go through all the neuroscience because most of you probably aren't too concerned with the neuroscience, but I'll talk a little bit briefly about how I would split up love if we were to abandon the word and only use the words care and lust. I think we would speak more clearly and more honestly and evolve in a better direction socially than if we just keep using this nebulous word love. And I think the more we use nebulous words, the more we kind of keep ourselves scientifically, psychologically stuck in more primitive ways of operating. I could be wrong. So proposing that we get rid of the word love and use concepts like care and lust, or Panksepp's care system and lust system to describe our behavior makes more sense. So the care system in Panksepp's view, in his book Affective Neuroscience, which I showed you in, I think, last week's video or the week before, or the Archaeology of the Mind was the book. I'm sorry. It's a great book, wonderful book. Definitely get it if you at all are interested about how your emotional states work. And again, I'm not saying Panksepp is the be-all, end-all. I just think this is the better of all the conceptualizations that exist right now. To be fair, before I explain the care system, there are people like Lisa Feldman-Barrett, who I've had a little back and forth with on Twitter, which was great, where we're kind of turning the science of emotions and motivational states on their head. And people are like Feldman-Barrett are showing that definitely our emotional affective response to the world is somewhat co-constructed and somewhat imposed post hoc after we experience something. So I'm going to keep that out there in mind, that what I'm doing might still be slightly archaic, but I still think this is the better way for, in terms of ecological validity and face validity, to explain how most mammals function. From, again, Panksepp's work, it seems pretty clear to me. So Panksepp describes the care system as a set of cognitive and motivational states, or affective states, that push us to maintain a sense of proximity, closeness with someone, and display behavior that shows our liking for and desire for someone else, which is separate from lust, which I'll talk about. Now, Panksepp points out that parts of our care system are intertwined with our lust system. So parts of our hypothalamus that are active whenever we're lusting after someone, and our ventral tegmental area and our dopamine's motivational seeking system are subsumed under both care behavior and lustful behavior. So it's totally true that they're not perfectly black and white concepts. But if you want to play neurotransmitters, for instance, 90% of the time or more frequently, when you're experiencing a sense of I care about someone in the moment, like your boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whatever it is, partner, when you feel like, oh, this person's really with me, I don't want this moment to end, that's typically a large rush of oxytocin and mu opiate and maybe a little bit of vasopressin going off, or something of that nature. Whereas when you're lusting after someone, or you're infatuated with someone, that's typically a high proportion of, D2 receptors going off and maybe some D1, and maybe a little bit of your opiate system going off, but usually that would be after or while you're copulating. So it's not to say that even though there's some intertwining going on, they're exactly the same system. And the other problem is the care system, which is part of your opiate system all the way from, your orbital frontal cortex all the way down through your midbrain, down to your periaqueductal gray, where your mu opiate receptors live, which is involved in a number of other affective emotional states. It also is kind of totally interchanged and not interchanged, interwoven with your kind of panic and grief system. Panksepp says in his book that our sense of care is the other side of the coin of our panic and grief system, our separation distress system, which is borne out in all the attachment theory research, etc. Because again, if you think about every time you've seen a newborn baby cry when mom leaves the room, etc., or they don't know where mom is, and you see this with infants, you see this with infants of every species, you see this with every basically mammalian species. When we feel close, safe, and connected, our panic and grief system is basically shut off, as Panksepp explains. So when our opiate receptors and our oxytocin receptors are going off, basically our GABA systems shut off, our norepinephrine system shut off, and our cortisol system is basically shutting off. So we don't feel as overwhelmed. And again, I know I'm speaking in very, very broad terms. So if any of the neuroscience people and professionals are pulling this apart right now, that's perfectly fine. Um, so care and concern are kind of two opposite sides of the same coin. So if you're going to talk about love, the best thing you could be talking about is care and concern, in my view. And then commitment is a cognitive structure. It's just, you know, a sense that we mutually agree to be with each other for a variety of emotional, biological, sociological, financial, etc. reasons, right? So if I were to redefine love and get rid of the word love, I would think we would be talking about the level of care that we have, kind of the intensity of our opiate, oxytocin, etc. response to people, our sense of concern. So on average, how often do we feel particularly concerned when the person goes away? And then how committed we are, which is all cognitive, not emotional, in my opinion. Um, and then on the flip side of love, we have lust, so to speak, which is just this infatuation or this intense longing for desire for someone. And obviously, again, if you are missing someone, if you're experiencing panic and grief, your seeking system is going to kick in, according to Panksepp. Your dopamine system is going to make you go after that person, engage in behaviors to text them, call them, go find them, etc. So for me, it's a problem to just use the word love. I think love is a terrible shorthand for how we really function, my opinion. And I would love to debate this with anyone. And I think if I put a little more time and effort into it, I might be able to back up the three-part sense of what we call love: of care, concern, which is a negative thing. I miss you. I'm scared to not have you, and commitment, which is a cognitive thing. So I would break love into two motivational states: care and concern, and then a cognitive state, commitment. And I would only be talking specifically, if I think if we were to move forward effectively, we should only be talking about the extent to which we care for someone, we're concerned about someone, and we're committed to someone. I don't think using the word love is a very useful thing. I really don't, but that's just me. And then lust is a separate phenomenon, honestly. So that's my take on love. And I think the animal research, the primate research, etc., I would think, and I could be wrong, but I would think that if you were to really take a look at Franz de Waal's research and other primatologists and ethologists, it makes sense to kind of have this simplistic dichotomy of more caring slash concerning behavior, concerned behavior versus more lustful behavior. I think those are two different motivational states that speak to different both emotional and cognitive structures in your average mammal. So I don't propose that we use the word love because it's actually too nebulous. It doesn't actually accurately describe a lot of behavior and motivational states well. The reason that Sternberg's theory is broken into three parts is because those three parts are kind of more of the of the uh, of the real deal, so to speak. So Sternberg's theory is right on. I would just get rid of, the let's see, I have care, concern, commitment for mine, and he has intimacy, passion, and commitment. So I would get rid of intimacy and passion. I would kick those off and talk about care and concern because those are more emotional, or care and panic slash grief, because those actually speak to the long-term pair bonding behavior of mammals, whereas intimacy and passion don't actually speak to pair bonding, because there are tons of people who are in long-term committed relationships who aren't having a lot of sex. Happens a lot. So I don't think that the passion side is necessarily important for love. Now, again, the rebuttal from people like Sternberg probably would be something like, well, that's more about compassionate love or companionate love, etc. And that's what most people engage in. Cool. Why don't we just call it care? We care greatly for someone. I think that's a different story. Anyways, these are my ramblings. These are my thoughts. I hope they make some sense to some people. Let's take a look at the concept, or at the at the comments. So Shannon says, hi, I'm in love with an Egyptian. I have passion and I'm 50 years old. Good. It's good to have passion. Soraya says, the Greeks had 4 words for different types of love. Yeah, I referenced those already. Agape, eros, philia, and storge. And then Shannon says, lust, and I'm animalistic. Cool. Interesting comments as always. So I hope this has been somewhat helpful, somewhat thought-provoking. I don't know. I really just want to toss my 2 cents into the universe and see if it resonates with anyone. Maybe we can keep using the word love. I don't know. I don't think it serves us to use the word love. That's my honest belief. So that's where I'm at. And I think I made a somewhat okay case in terms of if you look at the animal research and the human research, we tend to show care and concern, less so passion in long-term committed relationships. Passion and intimacy, I would reserve for Panksepp's concept of lust and leave it there. So we could really kind of bifurcate the concept of love into care/concern or lust. Soraya says, Eros sounds a bit better for intimate passion and love than lust to me. Totally. I mean, we can have a debate about which word to use. I'm just using Panksepp's language because it's kind of the most primitive and most primal and speaks to how almost all, creatures function that are mammals. So he differentiates a lust system in the brain, which is kind of seeking out and wanting to be close to and wanting to feel infatuated with, etc., another creature, versus a care concept, which is I want to show behavior that demonstrates my commitment to and my desire for closeness with another creature. That's all. So I would use Panksepp's terms, care versus lust. And if you needed to have another side of the coin, it would be care slash panic and grief to describe what we call love or pair bonding or long-term commitment. And then lust to describe just one of the behaviors that we do sometimes when we're with romantic partners, but also we cheat a lot as a species, and every species cheats a lot. So I don't think that sex or any other version of fucking or whatever, getting off, is actually a foundational part of long-term paired bonding. I think it's important to get us there. As Rick said from Rick and Morty, love is just a chemical response that compels animals to breed. That's half the story. But then the pair bonding part is a very different psychological and motivational concept, in my opinion. So anyways, I hope you all have a great rest of your Saturday, Sunday. What day is it? I don't know. And I will catch you all in hopefully a week. Who knows if I make it? We'll see. We'll see if I get kicked off of the YouTubes or not. Who knows? Anyways, please like, share, subscribe, etc. And all comments, all feedback welcome. Hate mail is great. Whatever you want to say. And please get my book, The Fear Problem. It's a great book. It's a great book. It's well done. It's short. It's simple. It talks about why we argue about politics and shit. Go get it. Maybe it'll change your mind. Anyways, have a great day. Talk to you soon. Bye.